Peace, peace. Hope all is well, my friends. Want to make a quick video here today again. And the topic is, it's a phenomenon, actually, a phenomenon of the most misunderstood person of all history, or the most misunderstood Jew of all time. And that is Jesus of Nazareth. And the situation that has caused about 2,000 years ago till our very day. Now, there's a lot to cover. There's a lot of history. But let me start off by saying that this is a topic that needs to be looked at again with fresh new eyes. A lot of what we've known, a lot of what we've heard has only come through one source, and that is the source of Christianity. Christianity is the vehicle, or the agency, the vehicle which has carried the banner of Jesus maybe about 250 years, 300 years after his death. Very quickly, a little history. Jesus was a Sabra Jew, meaning a Jew who lived in Israel, born and raised in Israel, and only functioned amongst his own people, amongst other Jews. His language was, according to scholarship, either Aramaic, that the Jewish people learned in Babylonia, etc. And in the first century period, they would speak Aramaic, especially homebred Jews who had lived there all their lives. They would speak Aramaic and they would speak Hebrew, these two languages. Hebrew was like the language of the Torah, and when they would read it, when they would go to synagogue, maybe amongst themselves. But I think the day-to-day language, some scholars explain that it is Aramaic. There's some debate about this, but it's either one or the other, either Hebrew or Aramaic, or both, which was more likely both. Many Jews also spoke Greek, many of them. Because Yeshua's background is from the Galilee, a hotbed, very nationalistic Jews who loved their country, and also very religious. It is more than likely, scholars say, that Jesus and his main core disciples, especially from the Galilee, did not speak Greek. They would have spoken only Aramaic and Hebrew. Maybe some of them knew how to say a few words in Greek for the marketplace, just in case they met any Gentiles. The Romans, remember, it was Roman-occupied area at the time. And so it was like that. The Jews of that time, the very religious ones, were very much against anything Hellenistic. And the Romans didn't really have a culture for themselves. They didn't really have a religious background for themselves, or even a language. Because the Greek language, the culture, the religious outlook comes from Greece, from the Greeks. The Romans basically adopted that, or not just adopted it, because Alexander the Great's empire and the 4 generals that came after him, they ruled such a vast area of the world that they pretty much engulfed the world in Hellenistic thought, culture, religion, etc. And so when we come to the first century in Israel, this is something that, you know, even after the Maccabees, they're still fighting. This Hellenistic background on Greek philosophy and Greek mythology, the religious, you know, to the Greeks and the Romans, they had many gods, and it was the norm for their emperors and heroes to be godmen. This was pretty normal. You know, this is where you get Hercules from. He's the son of God, of Zeus. Zeus is a god in a human form. All the gods of Mount Olympus were this way. This, unbeknownst, is where the Western world, Christians, especially the very first Christians, they get their outlook on when they're reading the Bible. They were never able to get that klipa out of their mind, out of the out of the gene, out of the seichel, out of their mind. So it was very, very difficult. Now, Christianity did rid the Roman Empire of gross idolatry, believing in gods of stone and the idols, etc. It did help for that. I think the Rambam makes that clear in his mission of Torah, called Melachim. He talks about this. Islam as well helped clearing a lot of the gross idolatry of the time. But getting back, so Jesus never really had any dealings with non-Jews for the most part, and you could even hear it in the Gospels. He says, "Go nowhere amongst the Gentiles," or "Go nowhere amongst the Samaritans," or whatever, And he has other things to say, which is a pretty Jewish thing to say, especially at that time when the Jews were dealing with real pagans, real idolaters who prayed to stone, prayed to rocks, prayed to these different idols. It was still a time of idolatry amongst the nations. So it was very difficult to have a relationship. Remember, the Jewish people are supposed to be set apart in order that the light be able to shine upon the world and hopefully bring people from the nations closer to, under the wings of the Shekinah, to know the one true God. It wasn't until after Jesus' death that, in the first century, many of the Roman world, they say like 10% of the Roman world was converting and becoming Jews. At that time, the popular opinion was that went with the school of one of the schools of the Pharisees of Shammai, who believed that non-Jews, even if they were righteous non-Jews, meant even if they kept the Noahide commandments, they kept the obligations that God had bestowed upon the non-Jewish world, that it was so bad, their predicament was so bad that they could not be saved, that they would somehow fall back, into gross idolatry, and it would just be too difficult. So what was the best thing to do? The non-Jews should convert, meaning they should become Jewish. Becoming Jewish, being circumcised, means that they would keep the Torah, the whole Torah, just like a Jew, the entire yoke of the Torah, and they would observe and do everything just like Jews. This is what you hear in the letters of Paul when it comes, being circumcised. That's what that means. But there was other opinions that a non-Jew, as long as he was righteous before God, he kept these 7 concepts. There were like 7 headings of things that they had to really, and under these headings there are other little commandments that they're supposed to keep. But one of them is to not worship false gods, to not worship idols. Okay, this is also incumbent upon non-Jews. So believing the Jewish nation in the Torah, in the Hebrew Bible, there has never been ever any belief in that a man is God, or that God can become man, because you won't find it in no source. You won't find that God has ever become a man. Now, man is a representation of God, not because of his physicality, but because of his characteristics, because of what man can do. Man speaks. Man has free will. All these different concepts, not the physicality, all these different concepts, it is what is called the image of God. God, from what we know, because he is infinite, he is without body. He is without any physical properties. He is called the boundless one, the infinite one. Outside of his self-revelation, there is not much that we can know about God, the Creator. And then, we have fundamentals that we have come to learn from the Rambam and others. I mean, this is not something Rambam created, the principles, the 13 principles. Many before him had already spoken about these principles. Rambam just kind of like pointed them out. and said that, we need to pay a lot of attention to these things. God has no body. God is not physical. These are things that the non-Jewish nations never really grasped, never really understood, because of where they come from and where they were entrenched in that religious culture where the gods were seen as humans. Okay, in the Hebrew Bible, an angel can appear, even speak in the first person, because he is a malach, a messenger of God. He speaks on behalf of God. He brings the message of God, right? He is like an extension of God, but the angel is not God. Okay, he is only an agent of God. Even if he speaks, you see, our 21st century does not understand what a messenger is like. Even back in the Middle Eastern, in those times when a king sent a messenger, right? He was like the face of the king. And when they sent, you had to respect that messenger or that dignitary as if the king or the president or whatever was speaking. So this is the very way that the Hebrew Bible speaks when God sends an angel. And there are different levels of angels, and there are different concepts of angels, etc. So this is how it is. So this is something that the Gentiles never really were able to get over, because things happened so fast. So after Jesus' death, going back to the opinions, there was an opinion amongst the Pharisees that the non-Jews could be saved without converting. They kept these principles, and they kept their obligations, the Noachide code, and through and through the Hebrew Bible, even in the New Testament, it talks about a person is going to be judged according to his deeds. I mean, everywhere you find the same thing. You're not judged according to your creeds, according to what you believe. I don't care if you think you're the best theologian, or the Bible front and back. It doesn't matter. You won't be graded on this. You'll be graded upon who were you? What did you do? What did you do with your time? What kind of deeds do you have? This is actually what Jesus taught. Jesus said, in that day, the day of judgment, many will try to bring him up in front of God to say, well, I accepted your son, your righteous one, as my Lord and Savior. And in that day, Jesus says, I'll say, get away from me. I do not know you. You doers of lawlessness, of lawless deeds. That's what he's going to say. It doesn't matter if you say you tried to do miracles in his name and you cast out many demons in his name. It doesn't matter. That day he's going to say he doesn't know you. Because the non-Jewish nation, the non-Jews, the Gentiles, did not have proper vessels to accept what was going on, and everything transpired so fast, they never really truly understood the message. Never. They never understood the message. Even down to our day, it continued to get further off the path, further off the path of what it was. It got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse. There's a great level, and we're not going to talk about this right now, about hashgacha pratis, divine providence. But God is behind it all, and God uses everything for his will. We won't talk about this today, but they continue to veer off the path. Remember that I've been 16 years on this path, learning Torah, Judaism, Yiddishkeit. When I began to learn what was going on, I had no choice but to follow it where it may lead. One of my deepest prayers has always been that no matter how difficult it is, God Almighty, help me to accept your truth, to be able to follow your truth, no matter where it leads. And do not allow myself to get in between that. Help me to be humble enough to be able to follow it. And I hope that I've done that to this day. I consider myself a Noachide, a B'nai Noach, a son of Noah, attached to the Jewish people, connected to the Jewish people. I practice Torah Judaism. And I believe that that is probably the ideal of what the Nazarenes would have wanted from among the non-Jewish world. We are supposed to be the best friends of Israel and the Jewish people, and not to have been such a thorn on the side, not to have committed so much atrocities, a history plagued by one after another atrocious act in the name of Jesus, by the way, towards the Jewish people. I say, I talk about the 16 years that I've been studying Torah, very deeply. I might add, I like to think that I'm a very serious student of the Torah, and I try to, everything that I learn, try to practice in my life. I'm far from perfect. I don't know all things, but I try to learn as much, and I try to walk that way as well, right? But when I was in Christianity, I had met, and even to this day, I had met people who continue on in the same doctrine, in the same beliefs. They will not veer from what they know, because religiosity and religious dogma, religious beliefs are passed on from parents to children, right? And it carries a lot of baggage. It's very, very difficult for one to leave those preconceived ideas. I never was religious younger, and when I finally began to research these things, I had to do it all myself. Many sleepless nights, much time sacrificed that I did to figure these things out. God is faithful, and he surely helped me every step of the way. And so Christians, they're in a very unique position because they're very close to coming to the knowledge of the truth, as I once was in that same position. They're very, very close to swinging things around. And I am of the belief that if Christians, even half of them, were to come to this knowledge of the truth about whom they think they believe in, I think that the redemption will be, I think that it would literally cause a chain of events that would lead to the redemption. I believe this. My mission and my dealings is not bringing Jesus to the Jewish people, but it is with my own with Christians. Christianity is a vehicle that God used to bring me to where I am today, and so I deal with Christians. I talk to Christians. Somebody once took the time to do that for me and helped me along the path, along the ladder, climbing that ladder of Jacob. And I feel that it is my unique mission to do the same. I think this is one of the big reasons why I have never converted. I think it would take away from my unique position and how I could relate to the non-Jewish world. So this is what I do. I'll say this, and I say this. I've said this various times. Anyone who keeps up with my posting and my writing, Jesus was not a Christian. And even if Christians say, yeah, I know he wasn't a Christian, he was Jewish, they don't understand what that means. When you say he's Jewish, what does that mean? That means religiously Jewish. You wouldn't even understand him. There would not be anything that you would have in common. He would never visit your church. He would be within a traditional Orthodox synagogue. He would pray in Hebrew. He would say all the prayers. He would look very religious to you. You would think he was, what was it called? I can't think of it right now. He's, what is it called, man? Oh, man, I can't remember right now. You would think he's all about, keeping the law, and we know we don't have to do it. You would probably talk about him this way. Think that he could be saved by his deeds. The Christian community would think about this about Jesus. Not to mention that if Christians actually saw him, they would probably try to convert him. They would probably try to preach the gospel to him. They wouldn't be able to notice him. They would definitely not be able to notice him. It is one thing to be able to read the gospel, right? But if you don't understand its historical context and the historical religion, the historical faith that he was born and raised in, Jesus never thought about creating a new religion called Christianity. Neither did his disciples. Neither did his apostles. This never entered their mind. This is something that came way after. So now, the only outlook that we have upon Jesus is the Christian outlook. We have forgotten. It is buried. His true historical context, his true historical meaning of his teachings. There's always been a few here and there that have been able to tell the difference. At a time, it could cause you your life to be able to say such a thing. But now is the time. And so we do what we do. Now, talking about the Jewish community and their outlook about Jesus, it's also very complicated. For the most part, the Jewish people and the Jewish community does not have a historical memory of Jesus of Nazareth. They don't. Because of this reason, because of Christianity and the Christians. Because pretty early, like very early, they began to turn on the Jewish people. At first, it was something like the non-Jews who became believers in Jesus through the efforts of Paul, maybe some other disciple, Jewish disciple who was preaching this message to the non-Jewish communities that were coming in, right? At first, to them, to the non-Jews, it probably felt like, what's going on? How is it that we non-Jews are starting to believe and not a lot of Jews believe? And so there was this debate and of course, non-Jews coming into the synagogue, that was also kind of weird. Like I told you in the beginning, the popular opinion was that a non-Jew, when he got so close to the community and he was, a God-fearer, Noahide, whatever, he would end up converting. But now these non-Jews were not converting. So this was already causing a rift. It was causing an issue. So there was more friction. Oh, and they're also believers in the Nazarene and, all the ruckus that this has caused, etc. So, the break began theological. But like I said, these non-Jews coming in, they really were not well prepared to understand Yiddishkeit. They didn't understand Torah. They didn't really truly understand Torah, Judaism, and what of all that meant, the ins and outs, and how to fulfill your obligations. I mean, these people were pretty new to this. Nonetheless, they continued to debate and there was fights and stuff. Afterwards, after Christianity became the religion of Rome, is when everything changed. There was not even a Jewish believer who was invited to any of the Christian councils where they made all these dogmas and these beliefs about a Trinity and saved by faith and all, only by faith, not by works. Any of these dogmas that were created at this time, there was no Jewish disciple of Jesus who was invited, no Jew in general who was invited so he can give his opinion about what the Hebrew Bible actually speaks, which was Jesus's day, his life, everything. That's what was Jesus and the apostles' life, was the will of God, the Hebrew Bible, and how it was actually lived in a day-to-day life. Nobody was to hear what they had to say. They went with their own philosophies and with their own background, however they understood the Bible. And so after it became a theological rift, then it became physical. The Christians began to persecute and kill many Jews, hundreds of millions of Jews throughout time. Islam did much of the same. And so after you're killed so much while holding the banner of Jesus, what do you think this does to the consciousness of a people? They say, if Jesus is such a good man, if he taught so many good things, how is it that these people are killing us like this? They never had a chance. The Jewish people had never had a chance to get a good picture, to get a good view throughout the generations of Jesus. And neither did they want to anymore. And so the only outlook, the only picture that Jews have ever gotten from Christians is the Christian outlook on Jesus, not the real historical Jew. Jesus, the historical Jesus, would repudiate Christianity to the core for all of its deeds. All of its deeds against the Jewish nation. Christians would have also killed Jesus in every generation as a Jew, as a religious Jew, because he wouldn't accept the Trinity. Orthodox Jews, I heard a quote once. It said, the only people who have ever lived like Jesus and kept the word of Jesus is Orthodox Jews. And if not all Jewish people, then the Orthodox for sure, because they live just like him. They would have so much more in common with Jesus. The prayers, the mitzvot, the commandments, how to live, everything. And, but Jesus rebuked the religious leaders. Come on. That only works for someone who has actually not read. I mean, first century, the religious leadership in the first century was corrupt. The Jewish community, the rabbis know this. The Sadducees, the priesthood, they were corrupt. For the most part, the great majority of them were all corrupted in bed with Rome. The high priest was not appointed by the Torah standard. They were appointed by Rome in order that they could have a hand in. So the high priest answered to Rome. He was corrupt. The priesthood was corrupt. The Jewish sources say this. The Talmud says this. The Pharisees, many of the Pharisees at that time were also corrupt. The Talmud, the Gemara states this. Rabbi Tzadok, he just quoted it in Sota, in the Gemara. It talks about seven different Pharisees, and six of them, it has something negative to say about them. They had some negative character trait. The religious leadership at the time was corrupt. And the second temple was destroyed because sinach chinam, baseless hatred amongst the Jewish people. Now, Jesus did not do anything different than any prophet that came before him. The Nevi'im. Jesus, he rebuked, and look how he rebuked the religious leaders. Have you ever heard how the Nevi'im rebuked Israel for its sins? The messengers of God come for that reason. They come because the nation has gone off track, off the derek, right? And the Nevi'im, the messengers of God, will come to bring people back to what? Bring people back in tshuva, back to the Torah, to obey the will of God, to do the will of God. And sometimes some of the rebukes were horrible. They were tough. They had to be. This was a life and death situation. Yeshua, in his self-awareness, through his relationship with the Creator, with God, did the very same thing. He came to turn the people back in redemption. As in his Holy Spirit, in his Ruach HaKodesh, he could understand that the nation was on the brink of something tragic getting ready to happen. And he was trying to turn the people back in tshuva. He even said so through his Holy Spirit. He was able to say, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, those who kill the prophets and stone those who are sent to you, how long have I wanted to gather you as a hen gathers her chick, which is a reference to the Shekinah, but you were unwilling. And now, the destruction comes, etc. He was able to prophesy that. So, there's a lot of flimsy type of objections. Things that, the Torah says you cannot have differing weights and measures in your judgment. You have to judge by true judgment. You have to be honest with the situation. And I know it's not easy for neither of the communities. But no matter what, both the Christians and the outlook that the Christians have given the Jews, all it does is slander this man's name. The only people who have benefited for the most part, and there's a lot that I don't know on this topic, the only people who have truly benefited are non-Jews. Like I said, and I'm going to read to you. There's an Orthodox rabbi. I'm going to read to you what he said. An Orthodox rabbi by the title the Yavitz, Rabbi Yaakov Emden, Orthodox Jew, a Talmudist, great scholar. He read the Gospels, and he was able to come to a different opinion of what was normally, traditionally stated, because he was able to put his preconceived ideas aside, and he did his work. And he read, and what he found surprised him. And he says in this work, it's called Seder Olam Rabbah Vezuta. He says like this about Yeshua of Nazareth. He says, "It is therefore a habitual saying of mine, not as a hypocritical flatterer, God forbid, for I am of the faithful believers of Israel, and I know well that the remnant of Israel will not speak falsehood, nor will their mouths contain a deceitful tongue. That the Nazarene brought about a double kindness to the world, a double blessing. On the one hand, he strengthened the Torah of Moses majestically, as mentioned earlier, and not one of our sages spoke out more emphatically concerning the immutability of the Torah. And on the other hand, he did much good for the Gentiles, provided that they do not turn about his intent as they please, as some foolish ones have done, because they did not fully understand the intent of the authors of the Gospels." Wow. Pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing. He said in another place in this work, he said like this, "Certainly, therefore, there is no doubt that the one who seeks truth will agree with our thesis that the Nazarene and his apostles never meant to abolish the Torah of Moses from one who was born a Jew." I mean, this whole letter, I recommend that people read it. I mean, it's beautiful. It's beautiful, and it sticks to the historical context of Jesus, the Jew. But I've said a lot, and I just want us to take a very serious look at this. And we need to come together in humility. The Jewish people do not need Christians missionizing them to get them to believe in Christianity. Jesus would reject Christianity. He would reject the gospel being preached to him. That gospel, he would reject it. It's foreign to him. It's foreign to him and his people. This is important. We need to understand this. And Christians need to be able to understand that there's a lot of things that we have in common, but there's a lot of things that have not been understood in this proper context. Jesus said salvation is of the Jews. He said that in the plural sense. When finally brought the question up clearly, they asked Jesus, "What must I do to be saved?" It's a scholar. He asks Jesus, and he says, "You know the commandments." Because man is going to be judged, and his sentencing will be according to his deeds. Is there any merit on clinging to a rabbi in this position, Jesus? Yes, there is. But if you think that clinging to a rabbi and living your way of life however you think you should live it, contrary to the will of God, then that won't help you. You will hear a very solemn thing said at the end. Get away from me, I never knew you. When you cling to a rabbi, to a righteous leader, it is because not only do you listen to his message, but more so, you live by that message in your way of life, in your deeds. I hope this has helped, guys. Many blessings to you. Peace.